I'm
Thanks for
wondering
having
what
me.
you would do if you were the mayor of a city like this, whether it's New Orleans, which has seen National Guard troops, or Minneapolis dealing with the ICE raids. What would you do? What would be your posture in dealing with the federal government?
Well, first of all, you're not just dealing with the federal government, not DEA, ATF, the FBI, the U.S. Attorney, the National Guard. Those are all very familiar things to mayors in America. And cities work well when there's a good partnership between the president and the mayor and the governor and all of those different agencies, which, by the way, happens all the time in every administration. What's unique about what's going on right now is that Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and Tom Homan have trained and created a new animal that they now call ICE. That is a national law enforcement that's imposing their will without cooperation and essentially without proper training, or if they are properly trained, they're given the wrong message about shoot first, ask questions later, and causing much more havoc on the streets of America that need be. Tom Homan, who has been doing this a long time, and he's not exactly forthright. When he says, oh, we're going to draw down, remember, they had 3,000 ICE guys. Now, people should figure out where they got 3,000 ICE guys from so quickly. Who are they? Where were they trained? What are they supposed to be doing? You can see from their behavior that they're not really trained like the FBI or the DEA or local police departments. So the first thing that I would do is what I did when I was mayor. We had to rebuild the New Orleans Police Department. Police officers are hired to protect and to serve. They see the constituents as people that they're serving. They don't see them as enemies. You have to honor the Constitution. People have the right to protest as long as they do it peacefully. Police officers, especially in New Orleans, are great at crowd control and making sure that people can exercise their constitutional rights. You never shoot first, you always shoot last, and only when it is absolutely necessary. And unfortunately, what has happened across the country at the direction of President Trump and Tom Homan and Stephen Miller is ICE agents have lost the confidence of the American people, even people who will consider themselves to be Republicans, independents, and conservatives because of their behavior. So I think that ICE ought to get out of Minneapolis right now, and they should start again. There is no mayor in America that I'm aware of that would not receive help from federal agencies to help root out crime, whether it be committed by an American citizen or somebody that is here illegally. But that's actually not what's happening, and it's a shame. And I think Tom ought to back up a little bit, and they ought to rethink their strategy, and then they ought to be fair and thoughtful about how they help make the streets of America safe. But right now, most Americans think what ICE is doing is making us less safe. And I happen to agree with that. And I think they got to really rethink what they're doing and get better training. They have to have background checks, body cameras. They have to learn de-escalation techniques, and then we'll begin again.
We heard the other side of this argument, Mayor, from Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas, realizing he's running for re-election. I think he speaks for a number of members of the Republican-led Senate when it comes to who is agitating whom. Listen to what he said.
I think, unfortunately, in both of these instances, these individuals did not cooperate with law enforcement. And unfortunately, when that happens, tragedies like this occur, which are regrettable. But I think the answer to it is for the sanctuary jurisdictions to cooperate with federal law enforcement so that federal immigration laws can be enforced, hopefully without these kind of tragedies occurring.
I wonder how you react to that.
Well, first,
not seeing the victim being blamed here.
Sometimes people don't really think about what Senator Cornyn said. Alex Preddy, who was on TV being shot in the back, got shot 10 times, was not the aggressor in that situation. There wasn't a riot on the street. He was exercising his First Amendment right, and he was actually trying to protect another woman who had been pushed. There are very few law enforcement officers themselves who would look at that tape and say that those ICE agents or Border Patrol agents in that situation did the right thing. And if they were trained to do that, then they were trained improperly. So Senator Cornyn is wrong about what is actually happening. Now, listen, to be clear, people should protest, and when they do, if they do, they should do so peacefully. But American citizens have a right to be present and to film law enforcement. We should know who the law enforcement officers are that are taking away people's rights and liberties. They should be held accountable for their actions. And yes, people should cooperate to the extent that they can. But there's a big gulf between what ICE is doing and what reasonable, thoughtful police officers should do, even in the most difficult circumstances. Remember, I mean, in the city of New Orleans, we have millions of people on the street all the time. Our officers are trained really, really well to handle difficult situations. When we took the monuments down, there were lots of people on the street, and people were exercising their Second Amendment right to carry firearms, and yet our officers acted with great restraint so that everybody was safe. There's actually a way to do it, but ICE is not doing that now, and they have to do it if they're going to continue to do the work that the president wants them to do in a way that protects people's constitutional rights and people's lives.
You refer to the masking of these federal agents and the push to have them demask by law. Senator Cornyn called that request an insult to their professionalism. Mayor, when you consider the interaction that you had with New Orleans police, who, of course, not able to cover their faces when they're conducting an arrest, how would you react to that?
Well, first of all, almost all the police officers, I think almost all of them, I don't want to say all because there may be some instances, we know who they are. We know what their names are. We know where they were trained. We know what kind of training they got. We know what agency they worked for. They actually have labels on their vest. This is universally true across all of America. So I'm a little bit just confused by that answer. And the reason we do that is because these law enforcement officers, of course, are the most powerful people in the world. They can take people's life and liberty away. And we have a system of accountability. And so that's just kind of the way it is. For them to have to be in favor of masked men with guns who have been basically told that you will not be investigated, you will not be questioned, you actually have a license to kill, should chill every American. And I think that most reasonable people, conservative, liberal, extreme, will look at this and say, listen, this is not the way that we are going to be made to feel safe in America. We clearly should have some kind of reasonable restrictions. And most really great law enforcement officers, and most men and women in law enforcement will look at this thing and say, look, they're giving us a bad name. And because if you can't trust the police to treat you in the right way, you're not going to cooperate with them. It just doesn't work. And so I think Senator Cornyn and other people I think they're out of bounds. And I think most of the American people know that ICE is out of control, and they need to be better trained and better focused and giving better instructions, and they have to be held accountable when they get out of bounds, which most people think they are right now.
You don't worry about these officers being doxxed. That's what obviously is the explanation for them covering their faces, that they in fact will be targeted.
But it's also, listen, it's a very dangerous thing. But every other law enforcement agent in America doesn't have a mask on. Right. They all operate under difficult circumstances. I mean, you would talk to folks in the FBI or the DEA or the ATF or the U.S. Marshal's Office or U.S. attorneys. But one of the things that they don't tell you is also an excuse for no accountability and not being able to question somebody's authority. In America, we get to, based on the Constitution, redress our grievances against the government and say when we think the government is wrong. That helps America be strong. You, in fact, are a great patriot when you constructively criticize your government. It is one thing that distinguishes from autocracies and kingships. It's one of the reasons why we actually revolted way back when. If you take that away, America ceases to become the country that we all promised that we would be to each other. And it just doesn't seem to me that it should be so hard to get this right. We have experience in it. The entire Department of Homeland Security needs to be rethought and redesigned. We put that thing together really quickly after 9/11. We're 26 years into it now. It's too big. It's too bloated. There's a lot of waste. And clearly it's not being run well right now. ICE is just a manifestation of that. So we've got to rethink about all this stuff. There's a way to be tough, but there's also a way to be smart. And that's what the policing should be. American citizens are not the enemy. And that is what ICE is treating people like. And that is a mistake.
I talked to Christian Menefee this week, Mayor. He's the newest member of Congress, a Democrat, young man, won a special election in Texas. Yeah. And we were having this conversation, and he called for the abolishment of ICE. I asked him about the impact of that statement and the way that it can be confused with defund the police, for instance. A lot of Democrats are very worried about the messaging that's coalescing around this issue. And here's what he told me.
You can't take something that was created and has been radicalized to this level that has harmed so many people and try to have minor reforms on it in a way that you think is going to protect people. I think that they are far past the line. And after folks are executed in the street, it's time to tear it down.
Time to tear it down, he said. How would you counsel Democrats in messaging around this?
Well, first of all, no, I don't. I'll let Democrats counsel, themselves. I'll say this about a couple things. First of all, Americans, everybody has a right to be safe. And I think that border security is really important and that we ought to make sure both of those things happen. Whatever kind of law enforcement agency we have, and in this instance, it's ICE, has to act appropriately. And if they don't, they have to be curbed and restricted and changed. Whether or not it's called abolishing ICE or reforming ICE or fixing ICE, tearing things down without having a replacement doesn't make any sense. I thought defunding the police was a really dumb slogan. Sometimes you need more money than less. But having said that, I want the American people to be aware of this. First of all, there are only 600 police officers in Minneapolis. There were 3,000 ICE agents there. And by the way, a very small number of immigrants. Texas has a lot more, and so does Florida, but they didn't send the ICE agents there. That's number one. Number two, they have now given ICE $156 billion. That is more money than most of the defense budgets of almost every country in the world. All right, that is extraordinary, and it is collectively more money than all of the FBI, ATF, DEA, U.S. Marshals. So I want the American people to think about a couple things. If everybody is focused on immigration and not just taking out the worst of the worst, but actually taking old ladies who happen to be gardening in their yard and throwing them away, and they're not focused on terrorism, and they're not focused on cyber crimes, and they're not focused on other kinds of violent crimes that are happening in America, don't you think we're off task and we're off focus if the whole point is to keep us safe? So I absolutely think that we have to completely rethink how much money ICE has, where the money is, and who doesn't have money. Like every mayor in America would like the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, the U.S. Marshal, and most police departments to have a robust amount of money to go after everybody who we know are the violent criminals, whether they're here legally or whether they're American citizens. And right now, the Trump administration has prioritized taking 5-year-olds and putting them in jail than actually gone after the real criminals. This is why police chiefs around America are saying that this is actually making us less safe. So we have to have an adult conversation about this, and we have to figure it out, because right now ICE is acting like the ass, and they got to get better at it, like really, really, really quick.
Wow. Mayor, while you're with us, I want to ask you about another trend that we're seeing here in Washington, D.C., and that's the return of some Confederate symbols and statues here in the city. You're probably aware of the statue of Albert Pike. There's another one that's going back into Arlington. It happens on a day that we understand the president wants to install a Christopher Columbus statue outside the White House, pulling some marble out of the river up in Baltimore to make this happen. It's pretty remarkable. I just wonder how someone like yourself, who had these Confederate statues removed from the city of New Orleans at great political peril, interprets this return, this move to go back to the future.
Well, let me say this. I think that the myth of the lost cause, which was that the Civil War was fought for a noble cause, is a lie. The Civil War was fought over the cause of slavery, which is this nation's original sin, and racism continues to be a very difficult issue for this country to grapple with. And people want to deny our history because for some reason people feel that because we think about things we've done in the past, that somehow we're saying this country was not great. America's the greatest country in the world. But if you're never ever going to get any better until you reconcile things from the past. Secondly, the Civil War was fought to destroy the Union. Had the Civil War succeeded, had Robert E. Lee succeeded, we wouldn't be here today. So I don't really think it's a great idea to lift those folks up and to memorialize them as though somehow they were American heroes, like we should put a statue of King George on the Washington Mall. I think that's a bad idea. If you want to remember the people that died, who were brothers fighting brothers, some on the Confederate side and some on the Union side in a cemetery, to realize the deaths, some of which Abraham Lincoln, memorialized in the Gettysburg Address, that's fine. But don't go tell me as an American citizen that you're going to lift up generals from the Confederacy or wave a Confederate flag and tell me that you're being patriotic. That's about as anti-American as you can get. And I just think it's a tremendous mistake. And I think it's a tremendous mistake to make men and women in the military right now who are fighting to save our lives walk under the banner of a Confederate general on our bases. I think that's a terrible mistake as well. We can remember our past, and we can make a promise for a better future without degrading the Union or denying our patriotism for all of Americans.